I'm just kidding. It's for anyone. I didn't have it, so I didn't say that. All right. They don't know the difference, so we'll just go with it. All right. So Romans chapter 13. Yeah, this is one of those. I got a lot of comments after the service on Sunday, and most of it was, in terms of, you did a good job with that, but I didn't like it, type thing. Because we do like our opinions, and sometimes those opinions are not the opinions of our leaders, and when they're not the opinions of our leaders, we don't want to follow them, because that's just who we are. That is America, but the truth of it is, there is no perfect nation, even America, and Americans, just like everybody else, are born with sin natures, and so this word from the Apostle Paul is good, that we can remember that even when we are not in agreement with the governing authorities and the people who have influence over us, we still kind of have to submit and subject ourselves to that rule. And whenever I think about this, and whenever I think about how much we complain about it, because we do complain about it a lot, I just think about the position that we're in, where we not only get to have a hand in electing our rulers at every level. You look even within the institutions that we did talk about. You look at marriage. We get to choose who we accept as a husband or a wife, and so you did it to yourself. We also get to choose who we have come in, at least in Baptistic circles, who comes in and leads within the church and within the government. We get to choose who comes in and leads within the government at all levels, local, state, federal, all sorts of different places. And so how much better off are we than lots of people in the rest of the world, lots of Christians in the rest of the world, who still have this exact same mandate, this exact same command as we do, but have no hand? And can you imagine how difficult it must be to be a Christian believer somewhere like China or North Korea or somewhere like that, where you have this command, and yet at the same time you have no say over who is your leader. You recognize that they are doing immoral and impractical things, and yet you're still supposed to subject yourself to their leadership and to their governance. Man, when I think about that, how easy do we have it? I mean, because not only do we have a hand in electing those leaders, as I mentioned, but the way in which our country and our nation is set up, we are encouraged to exercise criticism when they do something wrong. I mean, we are not going to be the ones who exercise criticism and then get arrested and then 2 weeks later, get shot by a firing squad. But this is part of who we are, and we are encouraged to do this and to hold our leaders accountable, to have a system of government that has checks and balances that hold those people accountable. And so we're in a far better position than anybody in the history of the world to actually follow this command and subject ourselves to governing authorities, recognizing that there is no authority except from God. Looking at the sermon guide, I really broke down the passage in terms of what it was telling us about governmental authority. I do, again, just want us to recognize that the Lord has instituted marriage, family, the church, and government. He is the one who's instituted all of these. He is the one who has placed positioned, created really positions of power within these to help with the governance and help us not to have chaos. Because again, why do we have chaos in the world?
Sin.
That's right. And whose fault is that?
Ours.
Absolutely. Okay. So it's not God's. They have we had this perfect setting where the Lord Himself was our governor and the one in which we spoke with and were directed by and lived in perfect harmony with. And again, it was us who brought this sin into the world. And so because of that, we now need other institutions, the church to exercise faith and the government to exercise rule over our lives. in order to minimize the chaos, in order to minimize the effects, you could say, the effects of sin that happen on us each and every day. Again, sometimes this is done well, sometimes this is done poorly, but whether it is being done well or done poorly, we still are to subject ourselves to those ruling authorities. Now, does this mean that we absolutely 100% follow the ruling authorities if they demand that we do something sinful or against God?
No.
No. Okay, what's a good example of that? Let's see how much you paid attention on Sunday.
Well, I was thinking that if they have us, want us to do something that's against God, we wouldn't do it.
That's right. We wouldn't. What's an example of that? I mean, there's multiple ones in Scripture, but I used a specific one Sunday. You don't have to use the one that I used, but you can if you want. Does anybody remember the one I used?
No.
From the thanks, Bobby.
I just don't have a good memory.
Yeah. Thinking about the Babylonian exile. It's written about by Jeremiah, written about by Daniel. Daniel chapter 1. Babylonian exile has already taken place, and so Nebuchadnezzar has come in and has totally destroyed Judah, set the temple of God on fire, and has exiled the people to Babylon. Daniel chapter 1, he picks out the youngest, brightest, strongest, fittest, smartest young men of Judah, and is training them to be rulers in this empire, of which Daniel is chosen to be one of them. He brings them in, has the finest food, which includes some unclean animals that they are not allowed to eat, has the finest wine, which they are not allowed to drink. And so Daniel goes to the official that's over them and says, hey, we're not allowed to eat some of these things. We're not allowed to drink this wine. Would it be okay if we, and this is of course my 21st century paraphrase, would this be okay if we continued with the learning, continued with the tests, but we just eat what we can and drink what we can? And they worked it out eventually after some back and forth, because God gave these men favor in the eyes of the eunuchs and the officials and those who were under Nebuchadnezzar over these men being trained. And they said, I tell you what, after a period of time, we're going to test all of you. And if you measure up with the rest of them, you can do whatever you want to do. And they said, cool. And so they did, and they excelled far beyond the rest of their peers, so they were allowed to. This is an example, because you think about it, what would have happened if he just said no? My guess, just from the life of Daniel, when the Persians take over Babylon, and the king there says, okay, nobody's allowed to pray to anybody except for me, does Daniel follow that command? No, he continues to pray. And so if they wouldn't have done this, my guess is Daniel would say, okay, well, we're sorry, we're not going to do it anyway. Off with your heads, that's fine. And he's because he is, again, trying to subject himself, he's not rebelling against that authority, but he just cannot do what God doesn't want him to do. Fast forward a couple of chapters later in early Daniel, we get to Rakshak and Benny, and Nebuchadnezzar builds this huge statue and says, all right, when the music plays, everybody has to worship me. Music plays, everybody's bowing down to worship, except these three guys are standing in the back and refusing to bend the knee and refusing to bow down to the statue. And so Nebuchadnezzar, in his crazy self, decides, okay, we're going to throw you into this furnace. Were they rebelling? Yeah, I mean, somewhat, but why were they doing it? Because it was something that they were commanded by God to do, and this human authority is now commanding them not to do it. And so our first and foremost allegiance is to God. But if the governing authority is telling us to do something that is not our preference, but is not against God, then in order to be in line with God, we have to submit ourselves to that governing authority.
Like taking a vaccine.
Do what?
Like taking a vaccine.
Well, here's an interesting thing with that. You know, I didn't bring that particular subject up within the sermon because it requires a little bit more explanation. We're all sitting here. They were asking about the vaccine, so we're all sitting here. Did the government mandate that you take the vaccine?
It threatened it, but actually get down to it.
To some people it did.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'll say it like
here's
you lose your job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the
That sounds like
this
a
is
mandate.
Well, this is the way I look at that biblically. If we're going to subject ourselves to government authority, okay, get the vaccine, or you're going to lose your job, which they can only do for government employees, which is what they were mandating, you know, and then everybody else followed suit and demanded it or not demanded it, whatever. So here's the way that you look at that. If that is a government mandate, you have to take this vaccine. I don't want to take this vaccine. If you don't take this vaccine, you're going to lose your job. Now that is the choice. Is you know, taking the vaccine or losing your job. And so here's where, and here again, this is just my way of thinking, trying to look biblically at what is actually mandated by this. Is it the government's responsibility to provide you with a job? Okay, I would say no as well. Okay, and so if the choice is you have to take this or you have to find another job, here again, me personally, I don't see that as something that person can then claim religious exemption for because they can go and get another job. Now, again, that messes up careers and all this sorts of thing. Me and I don't have this conversation with a lot of pastors because a lot of pastors are political too. But I did have it with a few that I trusted, and we were just kind of all in agreement. We were very happy that we did not have to. We're not presented with a choice of signing something for somebody, because that's essentially what they had to do. They had to, if you wanted a religious exemption, you had to have a religious leader sign for why this was. I would not want to do that. I'll give you another example. There is actually a religious exemption that you can get as a clergy member to opt out of Social Security, to where you don't have to pay for Social Security. And you had to sign saying this is my. I don't know if I can in good conscience do that. Do I think Social Security is going to be there for me? Not in the way that it has been in the past. Maybe, instead of getting the money you put back in it, maybe you get 60 cents on the dollar for the people who are working now or whatever it may be. So maybe I sign that just because I want to take that money and actually get all of it back, so I'm going to invest it myself. That's not a religious reason. That is a practical economic reason for sure, but I don't see that as a religious reason in which I can exempt myself based on what the Bible says. And so there are lots of things that we look at, and it actually is a perfect example, Bobby. It really is. Looking at that, there's lots of things that we can say. I don't think this is wise. I don't think this is something that would be beneficial to me. I really don't want to do this, not just because I don't want to do it, but because I don't trust it health-wise.
If you want to become pregnant as a mom, there was not enough information. No studies done. It can very well have caused problems.
And I actually do know somebody who what they did was quit their job because they were requiring it, and this was a young woman who knew she was going to want to get pregnant, and she was already married. It's not like she's just going to go find just an average guy and get pregnant, but she was already married. They wanted to start a family soon, so she did leave her job over that.
I knew somebody opposite. They were required.
Yeah.
They were in the medical field. They were required, but they also were young and wanted to have a family.
Yeah.
And they did take the vaccine and did have problems having a family. Well,
and this is where I think that you look at the what is rebelling and what is not. Rebelling in that instance would be I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to get all my friends who aren't going to do this, and we're going to plant a bomb in the Capitol building, and we're going to make sure that that we don't want to do this. Here again, looking at all of the things that are afforded to us by our national system, by our subjection to government, do I think it would be immoral and rebelling against government if that was a mandate to file a lawsuit against your employer? No, I don't. I think that's availing yourself of the government that you're subjecting yourself to. If they're doing something that is against the law, we don't just let it go by. That's not justice. And so do I think it's wrong to again, avail yourself of the courts? Absolutely not. But what I think we don't do is, just because we don't like what's happening with our, medical decisions or government, or, even taxes, as he mentions in verses 6 and 7, we don't decide to go and have an armed rebellion just over these things when there's other, other ways in which we subject ourselves to the government and let the role of government, not just the legislative branch who makes the laws, but also the judicial branch who, okay, you broke the law, and now it's time for you to pay this person who you forced to quit their job. Which honestly I don't think is over yet. I mean, with this particular subject, I think we're going to see it adjudicated within the court system for years to come, based on some overstepping because not only are you, and here again, we're getting just a little bit off topic, but not only are you forcing a medication on somebody, but then you're also forcing them to work from home. I mean, what's the, if you're forcing them to go digital, why does it matter whether they have it or not? And so I think you're gonna see that adjudicated, which again is not rebelling. It's subjecting ourselves and following the laws that we have. And I think where it becomes a little bit and here again we're gonna move ourselves into more modern situations here for just a second, kind of like that vaccine. I think where you see this a little bit grayer, I guess you could say, is there are some states who are using tax dollars to fund abortions and things like this, using tax dollars to be given to whether it's LGBTQ causes or whatever it may be. How do we respond in that way? Because we are not supporters of this biblically. The Lord is not supporters of this. This is taxpayer funded unrepentant sin that's taking place. So how do we deal with that? That provides a little bit. That gets us into a little bit different situation. You can even look at the past several decades and the one-child policy in China. Okay, so you have one child. You're a believer in China. You have one child. It's illegal to have another one, but your wife becomes pregnant. What do you do now? Do you have this government forced abortion and murder your child, or do you rebel against the government, have the child, try and hide the child, some other way, say it was your sister, lie, this wasn't mine, it was my sister's child, or whatever it may be. How do you work that particular situation out? And again, I think it is clear that we don't sin just because the government tells us to. And that's why it's incredibly important for us as believers that it's not just, I think that we as a church, and here again I'm talking about the Western church, the Western Europe church, we've gotten ourselves into far too much trouble over the years by, instead of spending time in personal study, oh, I don't know what this says, let me just go ask the pastor. Pastor, what does this say? And now I'm going to give you my opinion, and you don't know what's right or not because you haven't done the study. You haven't looked at whether this is the case. If we're going to be involved in determining whether something is against the Lord, that something that's commanded by our government that's against the Lord, we can't just be going and asking other people's opinion about it. We are going to be responsible for the decisions that we make about those situations, and so we need to look into the Word. We need to figure out what's going on. I use this example a lot within some of my classes. I'll say, if think about it biblically, okay, right or wrong. If somebody asks you a question, Nancy, is it wrong for you to lie to them?
Yes.
Okay, Nancy says yes. All right, so if you lived in the 40s in 1940 Germany and you had a family of Jewish children who came and asked you to hide them and you hid them, and then the SS officers came by and said, "Are you hiding Jewish people?" What would you say?
No.
Okay, so you would purposely lie. So what's the difference there?
Without any guilt.
Yeah,
Yes.
there was no hesitation right there, was there? Yeah.
You're
So what's
saving lives.
okay? So when it is a life saving decision, it's okay to lie. That's what you're saying? If you're saving somebody's life, it's okay to lie.
Yeah.
I
What do
feel
you
like this
say,
is a
Stephen?
trick.
It's not, and I'll just give you a biblical in Exodus when Ramses' father, so the Pharaoh, was killing all the baby boys 2 years old and under, and that's when Jochebed put Moses in a basket and sent him down the river. You know, it didn't start out by having the soldiers go out. It started out by saying to the Hebrew midwives, "Look, when a woman gives birth to a baby boy, bring him to us because we're going to have him executed." And they wouldn't do it, and so they were having these babies and they were giving them back to their mother. And so the Pharaoh called in all these. Well, it wasn't probably him; it was probably an official. Called these women and says, "Why are no boys being born? You're not bringing us any baby boys." They said, the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. When they give birth, they just go out into the field and give birth, and they hide them from us, and we don't know where they're at.
I don't know
So
nothing.
they flat out lied. But what's more important is we get the author of Hebrews, centuries later, generations later, who says that the Lord blessed them for that dishonesty. And so
You knew you were right.
you were right. Yeah, you were right. But so again, how did they know that? How did they know that that was not only acceptable to God, but that they would be blessed by God for that lie? But again, in other times in which Pharaoh would ask them questions that they did not want to give the answer to, they told the truth. How did they know? They knew because of their relationship with the Lord. They knew because they had more fear of God than they did of Pharaoh in this particular instance. And so even if they didn't like it, they would tell the truth to Pharaoh unless it would bring on them the wrath of God, in which case they knew the difference. But we've got to know, we've got to be studied enough to know, one, what is right and wrong, because that's just enough of a gray area. Not even just when we're talking about government. And when we're talking about life, it's enough of a gray area now to know, what is right and what is wrong. But when you're talking about instances of what is acceptable for me to look my government in the face and say, "No, I will not submit to you on this particular case." That is if we do that and we're right, that brings blessing from God. If we do that and we're wrong, that brings absolute judgment and condemnation for God. It brings what he says right here, rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who has authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. And so if we do that and we're wrong, then not only are we risking and having the wrath of man come against us, but we're having the wrath of man come against us, who is the servant of God, and it's God's judgment that's coming against us too. And so because of this, again, we have to be very, very careful as to how we decide that we are going to rebel against the government, how we decide we are going to submit ourselves to the government. Fortuitously, it's almost like the Lord knew that we were going to be talking about this. I was at our pastor's meeting today, and somebody was passing out these. Have you seen these before? This is from North Carolina Family Voter. And so this is just, it's a voter guide is what it is, for the candidates that are coming up in the general election. And so you got North Carolina Senate, North Carolina House, you got the National House of Representatives, you got the National Senate, just all of these different things, and it shows you what their positions are. And so you guys can, here, I'll give it to you. You can have these if you want.
We just need one amongst us.
Okay.
You can give one to Rex.
But So yeah, they gave me a whole envelope full of them.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so you've got this now. When it comes to how we look at subjecting ourselves to government authority, we're going to go out here in November. I think it's November the 8th is election day. We're going to go out here November the 8th or before if you do early voting, and we're going to cast our vote for the person that, hopefully, we're going to cast our vote for the person that we think is going to rule us the best. Rule us in a way that, from the Christian perspective, rule us in a way that the Lord is going to be pleased with how they rule. That should be our goal. If our candidate does not win, and we now sit for 2 years or 6 years under the rule of someone else, how do we react to that? How do we? Does it? And I guess you could also say, how do we as Christian believers present ourselves in the public sphere when our candidate either wins or when our candidate loses? What changes about that? Because is it wrong for us to talk about politics? No. Is it wrong for us to talk about politics in terms of the person that we think is best suited in terms of as a person of faith, and the policies and things and the positions they hold in agreement with or in opposition to the Bible? Is it wrong for us to talk about that? I don't think so either. I think that the second one gets in a little bit more of we need to understand why, because we're essentially a two-party system within the United States. And, libertarians will throw their hat in the ring every once in a while. Everybody else is pretty much a non-starter. But we're essentially a two-party system. There are Christian Republicans who will tell you if you don't vote Republican, you can't be right with God. There are Christian Democrats who say if you don't vote Democrat, you cannot be right with God. And so somebody is invoking the name of the Lord and on two different positions, so somebody is wrong. And that's an incredibly dangerous place to be. It could be, yeah. I mean, and they are, And so this is where, again, it's thinking in terms of not only subjecting ourselves to government authority, but also exercising humility when dealing with politics. Because we're going to have conversations, and we're going to talk about government leaders who demand our respect and who the Lord says we should respect. And we're going to talk about them in very negative ways. We're going to talk about them with no respect.
Guilty.
Myself included. Yes, guilty, absolutely. And so this is just another way in which we look at this, and we look at sinfulness within the world. And we realize if we take that deep look and we take that hard look in the mirror and we see all the blemishes and we see everything that we do wrong, our heart is not right because we are not able to disagree and criticize with love at the forefront of that criticism. Does that make sense? Our criticism comes from this person is an absolute moron and they need to stop immediately what they're doing, go buy a cabin in Montana and never be heard from again. That's the way in which we both shaking your head. This is the just nodding their heads. Yes, not shaking, nod. But that's not done in the loving way in which we again submit ourselves to governing authorities who again are not instituted just by us. This is not. There's lots of different forms of government. Whether you've got republics, straight democracies, socialist governments, you've got monarchies that still exist in the world today. Lots of different forms of government, but the way in which we react to each one is the same, or should be the same, but it's not. It's there. You have, and here again, this is the thing that blows my mind. Whether it is with how we submit to government or how we deal with tragedy and things that come upon us, the church and the people of faith who are in the worst possible circumstances with government and with just life tend to be more faithful to the actual commands of the Bible than those of us who are blessed with the systems that we have. It just blows my mind. And I think it shows just how prideful we are, how selfish we are, that we would think every single thing about government and every single thing about our health and every single thing about anything else that we want should be done exactly according to my plan, because the world revolves around me. NASA's wrong, and Copernicus and Galileo and all these people are wrong. The earth does not revolve around the sun, it revolves around me. This is what happens. But that's just not the way it is. We are all creations of the Lord for the purpose of glorifying the Lord. And in that plan that He has made some to be rulers. And they will be judged with how good a ruler or how bad a ruler they are. And He has designed some of us to be subject to that rule. And we will be judged not by how well we criticize that ruler, or how well we rebel against that ruler, or how well we force them to hate life and move to a cabin in Montana, or whatever it may be, but how we subject ourselves in a loving, humble way to that authority. And again, just like Sunday, I don't like the words that are coming out of my mouth. I mean, I just don't, because that's not who we are. That's not what we've been told. Yeah, we're scrappy. When something's not the way that we like it, heads roll in the streets, and that's just who we are. But that's not the picture that is presented to us in the Bible. I also think about earlier in the Old Testament, before we get to Jeremiah and Daniel, but you've got Elijah, who the entire nation has turned away from God, and they're worshiping. This is where you have the remnant, the 7,000. There are only 7,000 faithful people in all of Israel that are left. And so you got Elijah, who's ministering to Ahab and Jezebel, and they want to kill him, and he is not letting them kill him, but he goes up on Mount Carmel, and they have this contest, and then the Lord does for Elijah what Baal doesn't do for his prophets. And then Elijah's running for his life, because even after all this, Ahab and Jezebel want to kill him. So he's running for his life. This is not because he rebelled, not because he's trying to raise up that 7,000 and create an army, just because he's faithful to God. And Elijah's praying. He's like, Lord, I'm doing everything that you want me to do. I'm trying to speak to these people who can't hear, and they are trying to kill me. So Lord, I'm just asking if you would please just take me out of this world. He's asking to die right there. And the Lord lets a calming sleep come over him, has some animals bring him some food, and then he speaks to him in that gentle voice out of the whirlwind. And so whenever we just get so overwhelmed with the things that are going on within government and within our world, sometimes we just need a nap and a snack. Okay? That's what that story from Elijah teaches us. Sometimes we just need a nap and a snack and listen to the Lord. And it will help us to understand better the position that we're in. And so for those of us here and those of us at our home, come November the 8th, or come 2 years from now during the general election, if you wake up in the morning and things have not gone the way that you really want them to go, take a nap, wake up, have a snack, read the Bible, and I think it will feel better on what we need.
The snack came first, and then you took the nap.
Well,
ate a big snack.
I was going to say, if you really want to do it right, then eat a big meal, then go to sleep, and then wake up and have a snack. You can do it that way. Yeah, you can do it that way too.
One of the things I think about, that brings to mind as we talk about how we criticize government and, how we react nowadays in the environment that we're in. For me, and I think for Nancy too, that we automatically take to heart what's being told to us and follow the rule that we're supposed to follow, no matter how it comes about. But what happens sometimes, and this is happening more often in recent times, that we find that there is evil behind what is being told to us from our government leaders,
Yeah.
what we are supposed to do. And,
Well-
and it's wrong,
Yeah.
what they're telling us. And you have a lot of people, that jump on this same thing, that tell you this is, that you're the one that's wrong, that you're the one that is doing the worst in this world.
Yeah.
And, we started out, following, like what we're supposed to do, but then we come to the realization that there's evil behind this, and we need to not follow what they're telling us to do.
Well, and
then we get defensive, and then we get, even to the point that it makes us mad about it, angry. We're mad that we're being deceived.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just a lot of things that happen over a course of time that these things are being thrown at you, and it's a natural reaction to everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you stop that from happening.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we should.
Well, and I think that's where, there's a lot to be understood in terms of what our demeanor is supposed to be as Christians. And I think that's just as hard for any of us to have as anything else, because there are, and I've heard it described a lot of different ways, but there are people who, when they pass from this world and stand before God, their personality has got to change immediately. You know what I mean? Because the personality that they have here would not be allowed into heaven. These are believers. You know what I mean? And so there's an understanding. We do live in a sinful world. We're sinful people. We have those reactions. And when we find out, because political corruption is nothing new. It's just looking at who Paul was writing to. Anytime anything went wrong, it was the Christian's fault. Let's crucify a couple of them and everything's gonna be fine. And so the way in which we are lied to by the government, the way in which in our day, I think they've got just as much influence the way that we are lied to by the talking heads on TV, within the news and that sort of thing. You turn on Fox, or you turn on CNN, you turn on MSNBC, and they're all influencing. I mean, that's all they do is influence. And so the way that our views on things are changed by them, we often don't think about whether you're a politician or whether you work for a news agency. Everybody has an agenda. And everybody has a selfish desire that if this isn't going to get me my selfish desire, I'm not going to do it. And so, and you don't even have to be within politics. That's just the average person. And so how do we get to where we're not like that? And how do we get to where we can respond to that in a Christian way? We're never going to be able to change how other people act and what other people think and what other people do and say. So the only thing we can change is like I said, before we get to heaven and before we meet God, how much can we change our demeanor here? How much can our first reaction be to respond with humility and meekness and forgiveness, rather than through, you're coming at me, I'm coming at you, let's see who's going to win, type thing. Because we're never, and again, if you think about our life goal as glorifying God, the best way we do that is to share the gospel and bring more people into the fold. We're never going to do that by setting ourselves up as an opposing army that destroys the other army, which is all that these things are doing. Right. It's all our political parties do. It's all nations do. I mean, we're in the middle of, there's been talk the last couple of weeks about, what are we going to do if nut job in Russia sets off a nuclear weapon? And it's country against country. It's political party against political party within a country. It's citizens against citizens within a country. It's the church against the unbelieving world. If we set ourselves up as as just another army, we're never going to be any different. And so this is what's so radical about Romans 13, 1-7, is you spend 12 chapters, well, you spend 8 chapters essentially talking about our responsibility before God. You spend 2 or 3 chapters talking about salvation, talking about the sovereignty of God and how he worked through Israel and all that sort of. And then you get into 13, and we're going to pass from 13 in humility towards government, subjecting ourselves to government, to talking about love. And that's not by coincidence. I think it's Paul, through the course of his letter, seeing the faithfulness of God, seeing what that means to us and to them, more importantly, living in this, this difficult situation that they're living in politically. How can we possibly do all these things? Bam, we start talking about love. We start talking about this demeanor that we're supposed to have as the people of God, that's separate from all those other people who are trying to kill each other. It's separate from all those other people who are trying to use their position and their influence to gain money or prosperity or whatever they're trying to do. There's got to be something different about us. And if all they see when they look at the church is this is nothing, which is what they do, politically when they look at the church, especially evangelicals, is you are nothing but a tool for one political party to use to gain votes and members. That's the way that they look at us. And so if we in any way present ourselves like that, then whether we're helping or whether we're hurting, we're dishonoring God, which is, we failed. It's nothing good at all if that's all that we are. And so how do we get to the point where people don't see us as that? Well, they've got to know us as humble, forgiving, gracious people who will at the same time, at the drop of a hat, you force me to sin against my Lord. I am not going to do that. Even if that means my life, which in many cases it did and it still does today. I'm not going to do that. But up until that point, I'm going to be humble, respecting your position of authority, not rebelling against you in any way, because in seeking, just like Jeremiah was talking in Jeremiah 29, in seeking your welfare, I'm going to increase my welfare with the Lord. And so if this is where I'm at, even if I don't agree with everything that you're doing, even if you're taking advantage of me, I'm going to respond in a way that, again, seeks your welfare. And in doing that, the Lord is going to give his goodness to me and righteousness to me. But it requires a different demeanor than we have right now. And by we, I mean me. It's something I'm continually working on and trying to work out. Just trying to figure out how to deal with difficult people is something that I think is the burden of the Christian for their entire life.
Yeah.
And
I think that is good. To have the love of Christ and display that, every day, is the challenge.
It is 100%. And it's one of those, it's kind of like, it's just kind of like whenever I'm teaching my boys something, whether it's a sport or something else, I can tell them exactly what to do. We were hitting golf balls in the backyard, little foam golf balls. I can tell them exactly what they're doing wrong. Okay, you need to do this. Daddy, can you show me? Nope. I know how to do it. I know what you're doing wrong, but I can't do it myself. I feel like that's, sometimes that's the way sin is. Like we can see it, like I see the direction that we're going and it's wrong. I see the direction we're going as a country. I see the direction we're going as a church. I see the direction we're going as a family. I see the direction I'm going individually myself, and it's wrong, and we need to fix it. Okay, so fix it. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to change our nature and to change who we are. And that goes way on back to do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's a constant process of letting that Holy Spirit do it, whether we're talking about politics or whether we're talking about our family, whether we're talking about our friends or whatever it may be, allowing the Lord to change who we are, accepting the fact that who we are right now is not the person we need to be. We need to be sanctified and more like Christ tomorrow than we are today. And that only comes through the humility of realizing that there's things about us we need to change. And it's not easy. Yeah.
What does the Christian woman in China do with the second pregnancy?
She keeps her baby. That's an immoral command,
Okay.
and
And she hides it? Is that what they
Well,
do?
sometimes they do, and it's just like anything else. If you got the money, you can pay for it. Some of them give it up for adoption, which is why there was a time where you had so many people adopting from China. It's just because they had so many babies up for adoption because they didn't want to abort a baby.
They might be wanting to stop that now.
They do, yeah. Now they can have 3 because
Really?
because China and Japan, especially, not so much Korea, but a little bit, and China, Japan, the United States. Our biggest danger is not overpopulation. Elon Musk actually, and you can think whatever you want about Elon Musk, but this is a position that he's held for a long time. Our biggest danger is not overpopulation. Our biggest danger is population collapse, in the sense that we get to a point, countries or just the humanity as a human race gets to a point where we literally don't have enough young people to take care of the world, because so many people are waiting to either not have any children or waiting later on and only having 1 or 2. And so we're no, but you're at a point where it's really hurt China, and I'm going to cut this off because I don't think we need any more. But